Hi, I'm Nick Ravelis, the Geisel Director of Education and Outreach for San Diego Opera. As you know, we have a number of opportunities for you to get to know opera and our current season by tuning in here to UCSD TV. One of our most exciting offerings is Stars in the Salon. This series is an opportunity for you, our audience, to meet the singers, the conductors, and the stage directors who create our productions. Taped before a live audience, the artists discuss their roles, the music, and the stories behind the operas. It's especially entertaining and informative for those of you who are new to opera. Join us now for Stars in the Salon, and I'll see you at the opera. Welcome to this Artists Roundtable concerning our production of Aida. I'd like to introduce the panel. On my direct right, making her debut with San Diego Opera, singing the role of Amneris, mezzo-soprano Jill Grove.
Hi.
Next to her, making her San Diego Opera debut as the character Aida, the title character, soprano Latanya Moore. And another debut artist making his appearance with us in the role of Radames, tenor Walter Fraccaro. His translator is sitting next to him and is also the maestro, the conductor, also making his San Diego Opera debut with us, Maestro Daniele Callegari. Next to the maestro, coming back after a bit of a hiatus. He was last with us in 1998 as Friar Lawrence in Gounod's Romeo and Juliet, bass baritone Mark S. Doss. Next to him, a familiar face, but it's been longer ago than I thought. It was 2010, La Traviata, our stage director, Andrew Sinclair. And one other familiar face, but who was here in 2011 in the role of Timur in our production of Turandot, bass Reinhard Hagen. And of course, Mark is singing the role of Amonasro, and Reinhard is singing the role of the High Priest. Now, we're not going to waste any time on the story. I believe you all know the story. We'll talk about the music, but we don't need to listen to any of the music because I think Aida is the A of the A's, the ABCs of opera, right? We know this opera very, very well. And all of the people here at this table know the opera very well. All of you have performed, conducted, stage directed this opera a number of times in the past. But as artists, I would suspect, and I think rightly, that every time you come back to a familiar piece, you want to bring something new, something a little different. So my first question is to go right down the line here and ask you, in your role, in your role, whether it's as a singer or a conductor or stage director, what are you finding new or different in either your interpretation of the work this time or in the last couple of weeks of rehearsal? Have you discovered something new? Has your vision for your role in the piece changed even a little bit? Let's start with Jill Grove.
Sure. Hi. Yes, I think so. I think definitely, I think this is my 5th production of Aida, and every time Amneris is a little different. It also has to do a lot with my castmates and how we all sort of gel together and what the relationship is. I think in this particular production, what I found, and working with Andrew Sinclair and the maestro as well, is a much more sort of a younger, more insecure, neurotic, lonely girl that Amneris is. She's not a grand, middle-aged princess that is just mean and vengeful and call it a day. You know, she's a young, probably late teens, maybe 18 or 19, that is definitely spoiled and privileged being the princess, but is really lonely. And what LaTanya and I have found in working together is that we probably are, she is closest to me as a friend. She's probably the only kind of friend in my head, and certainly in my fantasy land of being a friend that I have. So it makes her music and her interpretation a lot more, hopefully sympathetic, but more agitated and more uncomfortable and nervous.
So do you hear that that girlishness in the music? Is it easy to find that new character?
It's easy
in
for
the
me.
score?
It's easy for me. I tend to lean towards a younger character just in my own thinking of my own self. I don't, grand is not anywhere near in my repertoire of colors. I just don't, as a person, don't really come off that way. So for me to find the youngness, and in the music, I mean, yeah, sure. I mean, some of that agitation and nervousness and, yeah, I think it's totally the music.
LaTanya, what about you?
I
Yes,
don't know.
steal the microphone from
I don't know what I would say that would be so much different than what Jill said, actually, because one big difference, first of all, is the relationship between Aida and Amneris. It's a lot more delicate than it's ever played. I mean, there's usually this big gap in personality. And with Andrew's version of this, the characters are so much more similar than people ever realize. You know, I mean, they come from similar backgrounds. They're both princesses. You know, they both had the same hardships, and they both live a lonely life, you know, because of that. The dynamic is very youthful, and because we play it so youthful and there's these insecurities and this loneliness in it, it gives another dimension to, especially a character like Amneris. I mean, nobody ever feels sorry for her, but, you know, it's true, you know, you really don't feel that, you know, but when you play it the way that Jill is doing it, it's so tragic. Once it comes to the actual judgment scene, you know, you feel just how guilty she feels about, you know, turning in Radames and how bad she feels about it all. You know, she becomes much more sympathetic when you relate to her as somebody so young and not really, you know, knowing how to be, you know what I mean, with other people, not really how to interact, you know, you sense how uncomfortable it is. And for a character like Aida in this one, because we're playing her so youthful, I like how hard it is for her to really conceal who she is. So when she gets the opportunities to show that she's a princess and to be who she truly is, it's such a change, and it's a difficult change, whereas if, you know, you play her a little older, perhaps she's better at concealment, you know? I also really like musically the way this is going. Generally, you find Aida is very heavy and thick and plotty, and with Maestro Caligari, it's not like that. You know, he brings out a lot of the fire, and it really complements what Andrew is doing here too. You know, it's very fiery and extremely emotional, and you feel the agitation, the tremble, and everything. You know, and so it's brought a fire to the role that I haven't experienced in a long time after all the times doing it. So I'm pretty excited about working with everybody.
This is really exciting to hear about the youthfulness of the characters. I have to admit that I've never really thought about that at all. Because, to use your word, one thinks of these characters as being grand, and I think in the past, in the age of the diva, they were played that way.
Well, sure, and also,
Yeah.
I mean, this music is big music.
It's
And
a big
so
show.
you're not really going to find a lot of 18, 19-year-old mezzos that are going to be able to pull off Amneris. So the majority of, a majority of mezzos that are playing this are in their, you know, I'm not going to say an age, but older. You know, they are a little more mature, and they aren't fresh out of school. It takes a while to get the stamina and the vocal strength to pull off a role of this length for a mezzo. And so a lot of what comes with that is a certain level of maturity and olderness that comes with the role that I find really interesting to play against, character-wise, play against that. I think it's interesting. So, yeah.
That's
Also,
great.
you know, like with the costumes and the set design, a lot of times you find Aidas and they're always very beautiful, you know, very bold colors, and it does look very grand. But this one is kind of a departure from that in the brightness of colors, use of yellows, oranges, turquoise, and it adds to the youth of it. It adds to the excitement of, you know, what these characters are really saying, what they're really going through. So, I mean, I don't know, it's going to be totally exciting. I mean, y'all should be looking forward to it, I tell you that. 'Cause I really am. You
That's
know,
great.
It's going to be nice, really good.
Walter, so what is new for you with Radames this time
Che
around?
cosa è nuovo per te, Radames? Che cosa hai dato che cosa pensi che possa essere diverso rispetto a tutte le volte che hai cantato questo ruolo?
Diciamo che il personaggio di Radames è un bel personaggio, però è abbastanza complesso. Vuoi spiegare?
Yeah, he thinks that the Radames is a character that he loves, but is not an easy role in the same time.
Excuse me, Maestro, could you bring the mic just a little bit
Sorry.
closer to you? Yeah,
Yeah.
that's great. Thank you.
You know, I used to conduct and not to sing.
Perché il personaggio di Radames è un personaggio complesso, non ha un carattere esatto. Bisogna arrivare al quarto atto per capire veramente il carattere di Radames.
Yeah, the role of Radames, you can understand it just when you arrive at the last act with who is exactly Radames.
La difficoltà è nel dare questo carattere, questo cambio di carattere dall'inizio fino alla fine.
For him, the most difficult thing is to try to find and to arrive at this kind of character that we want to know which is the character at the end of the act, of the opera.
Perché nella prima parte dell'opera
Because of the first part of the opera,
lui è un giovane
he is a young,
che viene così, il suo sogno è realizzato
he realizes his dream,
e quindi lui non si rende conto dell'amore di Aida.
and he doesn't understand how Aida loves him.
Lui pensa solo all'esercito,
He
al comando,
he thinks just at the army and the powerful of the.
il comando, e in un certo senso viene giocato da Aida,
And
tradito.
in a certain way, there is a sort of joke from Aida
Quando svela praticamente il segreto
when she says the secret.
del segreto. E però si riconferma nel quarto atto, riconferma il suo carattere, lì diventa uomo, come si può dire, in un attimo.
Ma non è chiaro qual è il carattere che conferma.
Nella prima parte il carattere è quello di uno che va alla guerra, che non
Di un-
pensa-
di un-
They do this a lot in rehearsals too.
che non interessa. Nel quarto atto lui ritrova, cioè praticamente ritrova la sua vera origine, cioè
Yeah,
va a
sì.
morire.
Yes, because he's proud, of course. He want to have a dignity, and at the end, he finally thinks that he want to arrive to die. No.
Then Maestro, for you,
Yeah.
conducting.
Well, you know, for me, it's I conduct many times Aida, and every time is different because, like we said, we talked the last time. You know, we have always different ingredients because one ingredient is the whole, one ingredient is the cast, which is always different. The production is different. So, and we have to try to combine, like a good chef, to put all these kind of ingredients and to try to put together and to maintain the same line until the end. You know what I discovered now? That probably exists another wonderful element in Aida, which nobody talks about this element, but is the orchestra. The orchestra has an important role, even because this opera is is one of the latest operas, Verdi's latest operas. And Verdi doesn't write this opera like he did at the beginning of his career, with when he used the orchestra like I hope that you can permit me this word, like a piano, no? Like in bel canto. But now we discover a really wonderful symphonic line that it was influenced probably by Richard Wagner. So you can find a lot of connection. This I don't want to say you can find a connection with the music of Wagner, but you want to be connecting the same in the same level. So, and for this reason, really, I want to put now the orchestra. I would love to put the orchestra in the same level of the cast. So I wish that the orchestra has an important dimension inside of the operation.
So if we're talking about a new approach to the characters as being much more youthful than we normally think of them, would you try to recreate that somehow, that the color of youth, for lack of a better phrase, in the orchestra? Would the quicker tempos, perhaps? Or?
No, it's not a question of quicker tempo, because when I first of all we have to start from the words. Okay. The words are really important. The libretto is the most important thing to understand the psychology of every single singer. But the fusion must be absolutely well linked, and this, for instance, will happen in the latest opera, which is Falstaff, where really the word is, you say onomatopoeic? Mm-hmm. Exactly. Is really connected the word with the music. In the same time, I want to do this. We have a lot of leitmotif that sustain all the time, all the dimension, all the action of the opera, who's following always until the end.
That's exciting. Mark, what about Amonasro?
Well, this is a incredible experience for me. I've done the role close to 50 times, which is maybe half of what I've done Escamillo, and I'm just coming from the Flying Dutchman. I've just done 2 productions of that. So I have the Wagner on one end, the Bizet on the other end. So this is right in the middle, and it's growing. I mean, it's a fantastic experience working with the maestro Caligari, and also with Andrew. This is learning different things. The music is extending itself. I worked on this part, La Scala, with Max Bullo, who's a friend of the maestros, and is now sort of a continuation. When I worked with Max, I thought, well, I understand this now, finally. I understand what Verdi is saying. So this is a continuation of that. It's always nice to have someone that's on the same page that takes you to a higher level, and you have a more intense understanding of the music. And with Andrew, we're having some ideas about seeing the character as he presents himself in the third act, and even at the end, there's a wonderful ending that, he doesn't usually have. So suspense we set up now. But these are things I've never done before with the part, so it's quite interesting and fantastic. But also just to talk about the musical elements coming from the Wagner, coming from the Dutchman. They ask you about the one word that defines the character, and I found, I think, with the maestro also there, it was on the same page. We're talking about the solitude of the character. With Amonasro, I think there's a lot of devotion to country, and that is his ultimate desire, and his undying desire. He's not someone that's trying to use his daughter because he sees that she's in love and that he can get something from her that he needs because his people have to survive. So it's very much about what he has to do, and he has to invoke that in her as well to let her know that she has to be devoted to country as well, and the survival of the people is very important. So I mean that's the growth of the character on both sides. I don't see anything else that I can add to that. It's really going to be a fantastic experience.
Great. Andrew, everybody's been talking about you before we get to you, so let's get to you. And what are you bringing new to Aida after probably having stage directed it many times.
Well, this is the third Aida that I've done, and I think that when I did my first and second Aidas, the second one was actually here in San Diego, just into this current century, that I probably did play it the grand way that everybody has been talking about. And certainly the music can say that. But the music can also say something else, as I discovered this time. Now, I'm extraordinarily lucky to have a top-class cast and conductor. I mean, the cast are fantastic singers, but they're also actors. And the physical production is very interesting by Zandra Rhodes, who I've worked with before. And it presents something different. And so when I was looking at it, I thought, I wonder if we could do this. Now, having this cast, all of whom have sung their roles many times, is extremely exciting, but it could also be extremely daunting if they said, what do you mean you want to play it young? You know? And so it's been very, very interesting. I mean, it's always good, I think, to have an experienced cast, because while you may have your ideas, they present other ideas, and we are, Maestro and I were just having this discussion a few minutes ago, we are, after all, a team. We just have different titles. There are no small parts among the major principal roles in Aida. Each character has conflict, whether it's the conflict of love, whether it's the conflict of duty as against a private life, which was one of Verdi's big themes, whether it's a political conflict, as in the case of Amonasro with his daughter, or even with Ramphis, the high priest, and the king. Because I touched on this when I did Aida here before, that there is really a strong feeling between the king and Ramphis. You know, Verdi didn't care for the church. And mostly in his operas, the church and the priests come off in a very negative way. It was only at the end of his life that his wife persuaded him to go back to the church. And so looking at Aida, the king, you know, is Pharaoh, the daughter of Pharaoh, important titles. But the country is actually run by the priests. It's a priest state. And so I've looked at the king as somebody who would like to change this, who would like to have a different sort of Egypt in the future. He's not going to really do much about it now, but he would love somebody new and liberal, like Radames, a brave man who could change things. Ramphis, of course, has the power. And when Reinhardt and I started talking about this, it's just gone further and further and further, even to yesterday with the end of Act 3. So that now there's a very clear conflict. I mean, in opera you have to play conflict, always, of some sort. Otherwise, if you play one dimension, it's very dull. Fabulous music, but dramatically dull. So this has been a very interesting journey, and I don't think we've finished yet. We've still got a week or so, and I think there's still lots more to discover as we find each rehearsal when we talk. But it is a fantastic cast and a fantastic maestro, and I'm having a great time, so I hope you do too. And I just want to say that it is an opera about people. It's not an opera about Egypt. It's not about historically correct Egypt. It's not an opera about camels and elephants. It's an opera about people, and we should remember that.
Reinhardt, would you reflect on that, the changes that perhaps you're experiencing in this time around with the High Priest?
Definitely I would, and let me start like this. Once a colleague told me that if a witch from Hansel and Gretel, usually sung by the tenor, doesn't get booed, then he didn't do a good job.
So in my roles, which I usually do as kings or fathers or priests, I never had this experience until now, probably. Maybe I will get booed, because in this production, which is my sixth production of Aida, 4 as a Ramphis and 2 as a king, Ramphis is quite brutal, and actually I have to kill 2 people in this production. First of all, one of the dancers, which is given to Phtar, and then I kill at the end of the 3rd act to...
Oh, don't tell us, don't tell us.
Why not? Why not? Okay, well, no, you can imagine what I do. So I'm not allowed to, so anyway. But I think it's different. There's no doubt that Ramphis and the priest run the country, and it's always a little fight between the king, who is kind of led by Ramphis, and this time he starts to go his own way, and Ramphis cannot control him anymore this much as he used to. So this is a way, the new Ramphis is the way to solve this problem, to get rid of people he doesn't like.
Those were wonderful responses, thank you. Latanya, what are the specific challenges of singing Aida?
As opposed to...
As opposed to Butterfly.
Okay. I guess the big challenge is naturally, I'm kind of an emotional singer. And I guess sometimes when you're doing Verdi stylistically, you're supposed to kind of bring in the reins a little bit, and you can't let loose the way you want to, although I'm probably going to anyway. So that can get really challenging, because vocally it's very difficult to sing a role like Aida. I mean, you have one sort of vocalism that you use for Act 1 and 2, and it's a completely different thing once you turn to Act 3 and 4. Although there's some big moments when you're singing Act 3, for the most part, it's much more delicate, you know, it's more seductive. Everything that you sing is very more internal, I suppose. Whereas in Act 1 and Act 2, it's just boom, 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 and it's just outward emotion all of the time. And, you know, Act 3 and 4, things, I think it's more reflective. The challenge for me is usually, you know, not just trying to, you know, restrain myself emotionally. When doing a character like this. I mean, opposed to something like Madame Butterfly, I always find like getting very emotional helps me. But it hinders when you're singing something like Aida.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, you know, I mean, it's tougher. For me personally.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe for some other soprano, they'll find Aida easier than doing Madame Butterfly. But for me, it's really hard to restrain myself. So I probably won't, so get ready for that, you know.
Yeah, you bring up a point, and that is that with some Verdi roles, and I'll toss this to Maestro, and Violetta comes immediately to mind, that it's written for 3 sopranos.
Yes, it's true.
Right?
It's true.
And talking to Walter the other day, he was saying very much that Radames is like this, that there are two different tenors, and you called one heroic and
Ruolo è lirico,
The first part.
heroic and lyric,
poi diventa eroico,
and you have to be able to
drammatico, eroico.
you have to
translate the
pull
translation.
off both successfully. So what about this, Maestro? I mean, is it that Verdi didn't know what he was doing, or did he have singers
No,
that could do this?
I think that probably the technique, the vocal technique was different, because we can have the same example even in other operas. You know, at the time there was, for instance, singers like Giuditta Pasta, that they were singing an enormous repertoire.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
and nowadays it's impossible to have the same singers that who can sing now, for instance, Polione and Fenton.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
you know. But I think that probably was different, the technique. Even, for instance, if you think about the contralto, the real contralto in Verdi's opera, who doesn't exist anymore. Right. I have no example for a real Verdi contralto. I'm very curious to go back in the time and to listen the singers of that period.
What was that color like?
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. And probably it's the same in the orchestra. For instance, you know that the double bass, now we have the double bass of 4 strings, but once was the, how do you say, lirone, I don't know if it exists a name in English, but the double bass was with 3 strings, with a natural string. So, and you have to know that now we use in the pit, normal pit, we use 6 double bass, but in La Scala, when they did the first performance of every important, Verdi's opera important, they used at least 16 double bass, because the double bass was smaller, was really smaller. You know, it's changed completely. Even the brass are totally different now, because at the time the brass they were smaller, and now we have a brass very important. With the horns, you can use the same instrument and you can play in 12 different tonalities. At the time they had different horn, so when they have to change in corno in fa, corno in mi bemol, they had to change the instrument.
Yeah.
And all the instruments they were on the chair.
Oh my God, man.
You know, I think it's completely different now the way how we can approach the music, and of course there's been an evolution in the voice, in the technical voice.
Well, and Verdi helped push that evolution.
Sure, absolutely,
I
absolutely.
think, particularly in the last half of his
Absolutely.
career,
But even
demanding so much more.
If you think Otello, for instance, "Esultate l'orgoglio musum," and then the second act is, it's always, and you need almost a baritone. You know, it's really unbelievable how he was thinking, you know? And probably he had this kind of voice. I don't know. We have to go back in the past.
Yeah, well, one day we'll do that.
Yeah.
Jill, we've discussed how fabulous your judgment scene is. Can you describe the scene to the audience and tell us why it's so satisfying for you to sing and to act?
Is it? Ask me on opening. No, the judgment scene, I think, is really such a pinnacle for a mezzo to sing. You know, mezzos don't always get a lot of great scenes. It's usually the soprano, and we're there holding the props. You know, but this is a true, I mean, you know, that's all right. It's all right. I've made a career out of holding props, so I have no problem. I put my son through college on propdom, so it's totally fine. But, you know, the judgment scene is, I mean, what do you mean specifically? What is the...
How do you feel? Just what's
How
the
you
sheer
feel about it?
human feeling when you're standing up there and you know,
As
and
Jill,
you're turning
the
against the
person.
man you love and
As Jill the singer, it's fantastic. It's fun, it's exciting, it's vocally rewarding, it's all of those great things. As Amneris the character, it's heartbreaking. It's, you know, she's confronting Radames for the last time to basically try to change his mind if he's been called out on treason and betraying his country, and he's now going to go before the priests. They're going to kill him, obviously. And she thinks, in her little delusional Fantasyland mind, that she could save him. You know, she'll just talk to Dad. She'll talk to her dad. You say you made a mistake. We'll rule the country together. It'll be fine. We'll figure it out together. And when he doesn't do that, he stays clear in his, no, I'm going to basically face my truth, and this is what's happened, and this is my honor, and I love Aida, and I'm not going to betray her, and fine, put me to death. And so then she is faced with the priests. She has to go, and once again, in happy delusional Amneris land, thinks that she's going to talk to the priests and change their minds, which she doesn't. You know, so I think at the end, she thinks she has all this power because she's the Pharaoh's daughter. She's got lots of pretty clothes, and she probably has a camel. You know, who doesn't? You know, she's probably, you know, I mean, she's probably been given everything that she has. you know, and she thinks that if she just says the word, she can fix all this. And she can't. And I think that that is a very heartbreaking and tragic moment in a person's life when they think they have power, they truly don't have any power, and they realize that they don't have any power. And so, yeah, so it's a big scope.
But to
it's
play that is really.
But to play it is so much fun.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't trade it. It's fantastic.
I'm totally jealous.
Yeah, I know. Sorry. You can have the last bow. That's all right.
Walter Radames has, I think it must be, and I'm sure every time we've had an artists' roundtable, we have to address Celeste Aida, because it is the most difficult entrance for a tenor, I think, in the repertoire. And yeah, I mean, you've got 3 minutes on stage, and boom, you have to sing one of the most difficult arias in the repertoire, which I only just noticed in the last couple of years, that as we spoke about on the podcast, every phrase goes up. It just, it's unrelenting. So I guess, again, I want to get to the human feeling. How does it feel to do that, to have that responsibility, to have the first aria in the piece after 3 minutes of no warm-up?
È molto semplice.
It's very simple.
Non ci penso.
Don't think it.
Don't think.
Don't
Just
think.
do it.
La penso facile.
You think easy?
Oh, if you think it's
Easy.
easy, it is easy, as I think is perhaps.
Se incominci a pensare nella difficoltà e incominci a creare dei problemi che non ci sono.
If you can start to think too much, you really can create problems that in the reality doesn't exist.
Allora, in studio viene bene.
When he's studying, is
Nelle
going well.
prove
During
viene
the
bene.
during the rehearsals, it's okay.
Se proprio viene male alla recita,
If it doesn't work at the performance, we are in the
non è mai successo, ma
we are in the hands of God.
però sono delle cose che specialmente prima, la notte prima della recita, anche se io
The night before the performance,
se ho fatto diverse recite di Aida,
even if he has done many performances of Aida,
c'è sempre
there is always
un'ora dedicata a quel Celeste Aida come pensiero prima di addormentarmi.
he has always 1 hour thinking about Celeste Aida before starting.
Perché penso sia, cioè non l'ho detto io, l'hanno detto anche i più grandi tenori del passato.
All the tenors in the past say the same thing.
È un'area la più difficile penso per il tenore.
It's probably the most difficult area for the tenor in the Verdian.
Well, then
Verdi's
then
opera.
we won't ask about it anymore. We won't think about it anymore. You've got a week and a half to relax. And that brings up an interesting question, Mark, and I'll throw it to you. You know, I think singers are athletes, particularly opera singers. How do you prepare for a role physically? Do you have a physical regimen when in preparing to sing and keeping your voice healthy, perhaps in a general way, or maybe more specifically in approaching a production like this?
For sure. I mean, whenever I would give even master classes, and I've heard other people say it, some of the great singers, that the ideal singer has the body of an athlete and the face of a dummy. So athletic, everything comes out. But yes, I mean, I've done the Escamillo, over 100 times, maybe 125 times. I recall most of the productions were in Brussels. And in front of La Monnaie, I would be out with my jump rope because I came up with basketball training, cross-country training, tennis, baseball. I wanted to be a baseball-playing priest at one time. So don't know how that was going to happen. But yes, I'm out and jumping, you know, jumping the rope, doing all the different, and people would go by and you say, "You're a boxer? You box?" I says, "No, I'm an opera singer. I sing." And they start scratching their head and they just go off. But, so I mean, something like Escamillo always requires something like the stamina, because it's just it's like the Olympic event. You get out there and you have to get that, you know, 9-9, 9-5, you know. So you go for those, and it was the same thing with the Dutchman that I just did in Bologna. I think I had to also work up the stamina, even though the Dutchman doesn't move around as much. He's a very still sort of character, but there's a lot of intensity with a 10-minute aria that you have to start, you know, the opera with. So, yeah, the physicality is very important.
Yeah. Reinhard, I'm going to start this question with you, but I'd like all of you, if you have an interesting story about a previous Aida that you may have been involved with, or perhaps any opera that where the staging was a little bizarre, or something went wrong, or but I'll let Reinhard do it first,
Yeah,
and then we'll
absolutely.
come back to
We'll
Jill,
work our
because
way.
we already have a story for you.
Obviously very nervous, and the moment when it entered the stage, it lifted the tail and lost every step, lost something. So, okay, the problem was it was on stage now. How do you get rid of that? All the slaves coming in and have to throw themselves on the stage, so they had to throw themselves around that. And at that production, I was the king, and fortunately, I could go very far in front on the ramp, and I didn't see what happened behind me. What I was told after, there was this one guy who mixed himself into the slaves with a bucket, but unfortunately he forgot the shovel. So he had to take everything with his hands into the bucket. And everybody started laughing, including Ramphis, who told me the story later, and I said, thanks God I didn't see that, because I wouldn't have been able to sing one single note anymore.
I just wanted to comment about, you know, the Met production of Aida to avoid that situation. Now what they do is they give the horses enemas, and they starve the horses for 24 hours so that they don't, you know, poop on the stage. So
Dear God.
I'm glad you got that story. It'll never happen again.
That's
Funny.
I don't even want to ask who has to do that.
I know.
I don't want to even know. Andrew?
I don't have any particular Aida stories, I don't think. I've been involved as an assistant director with one or two rather strange ones, which I didn't understand at all, but anyway. No, I do remember a butterfly once where the butterfly was taken ill the night before the performance, but thought she could do it. And we got a cover in just in case, but she said she'd be fine, so we had the cover standing by just to sing from the side if necessary. Well, at the end of Act 1, she said she was fine. Halfway through Act 2, it was clear that she wasn't fine. And so I went backstage. I was on performance duty, and the stage management told me that she said she couldn't go on. So at a certain point, it was agreed when she came off to get the child, the other lady would appear discreetly around the side of the proscenium and would sing, and the lady on stage would just mime. Well, of course, there was no time to tell this to Sharpless. So when Butterfly entered miming, and the voice, or Butterfly mimed a questo, and the voice came from somewhere totally different, the Sharpless was so surprised that he dropped his line, Elie Sour, at which point this alarmed the Butterfly, who was actually miming at this point, so she started singing again. So on it went, and it was actually a broadcast over the radio that night. And the flower duet was a flower trio. Well, normally in this production, there's no break. We don't have an intermission between Acts 2 and 3. But this particular night, we had to, because obviously the audience needed an announcement. The BBC had to reset their levels, and we had to tell scheduled soprano not to sing, just to mime. So we did all that, and in the production, as dawn breaks over Nagasaki, you have these lovely stars that go out. And something happened technically, and as dawn broke, we couldn't fly the stars out. So there was this non-singing butterfly with a butterfly singing from the side of the stage and a tangled mass of wires with globes on them. It was a perfect end to perfect evening, really. But could I just say one thing about Aida, which I really should have said before? The first time you see Aida, she's in a subservient role. And I think that's always very difficult, dramatically, to recover from visually. So what we have here is that we play from the beginning, and you'll see how, a very proud woman who is a prisoner of war, who has a conflict in her life with Radames, by loving Radames, by loving the enemy. And so we see what sort of person she is before you see that subservient entrance. And Latanya manages to bring off this mime show brilliantly, and it makes all the difference.
You know,
Okay. Okay, now you can go back to your funny stories.
Yeah. Well, I have to say, to remark on that, I happened in on your rehearsal of that. And at first, it really took me aback. I thought, what on earth is going on? This isn't in the... Oh, that's the prelude. And so we meet Aida during the prelude. And that's the first time I've ever seen that done. Is there a tradition of doing that at all?
I have no idea. I've never seen the prelude stage, but there may be.
But by the end of the prelude, I was sold. I thought that works so beautifully. And it's really something to look forward to. It's quite unusual, an unusual opening for the show, and set against that gorgeous prelude, that wonderfully enigmatic prelude. It's really lovely. We're running out of time, and I want to save Jill's story for last. And it's not about Aida, but just to give you a little bit of a preface, she came in, it was just yesterday, I think, for the podcast interview. And in order to spice up those video podcasts, I go online and look for photos or images of the singers in various roles, and I found this wonderful image of Jill, bald, wearing an outlandish outfit,
Yes.
and then with breastises that come out to here.
breastises?
I've never seen like. So would you tell us a little bit about that?
Okay.
Give me
Here's
some
the story.
Give me some colorful background on
Some
it.
little colorful back. It was Electra in Chicago this past fall. A wonderful production, new production. And Clytemnestra. It was kind of set on the southern part of the Mediterranean, very tribal, okay? So I was very tribal. So I was bald with lots of beads and garlic and all of the, all of her mysterious, superstitious things, because she's very superstitious. She's also topless. I was asked if I would mind playing topless, and I said, I don't mind, but I don't know that you're gonna really like what it is, because I don't know when the last time this man had seen women's breasts, but they don't look like what was in the picture that he drew. They don't stand still, they don't just sit there. Not at a 40-year-old woman anyway. So I said, they have their own direction. They're not going to do what you think they're going to do, so you might want to rethink your, I don't mind. It's not a, but. So he came up with a brilliant thing. Brilliant people at Chicago did prosthetic bosom, that they built onto a bra, very comfortable, but their breasts, big. And the way they were designed and the light and everything, they were a whole other character. It was like, Clytemnestra's breasts. Okay, so we work it out. It's great. They add some fringe. It's fine. Nobody's offended. It looks fantastic. It looks great. Next, so opening or performances, we have a little round table luncheon with some of the really, really high donors. So one of the woman I was sitting, I don't know her name, or I would probably tell you, but I don't know her name. She was my donor woman that was at my table. Well, she was very uncomfortable to sit with me at lunch because she had seen me the night before in the production. And so she felt also the need to tell me these things. I don't know why they tell me these things, but she felt the need to share with me how uncomfortable she was having lunch with me after seeing me last night in all of my glory. And I'm listening, and I'm like, okay, thanks. I don't know what you want me to say. She's like, I'm very uncomfortable. I love the production, but I'm uncomfortable talking to you right now because of everything I saw last night. And it dawned on me what she was talking about, and I was like, ma'am, they're not real. That's not me. And she stopped, and she was like, they're not? And I said, no, ma'am, they're prosthetics. It's part of the costume. It's not me. And she was like, oh, well, you were just wonderful then. And I was just like, pass the chicken. I was like, good Lord. So the things we do as opera singers, yeah. That was a fun one.
On that
Yeah.
note, on that very high intellectual level, we're going to leave this lovely discussion of Aida, but I want to thank all of you for being my guests, and we're so looking forward to Aida next week, and I'll see you at the opera. Thanks for coming.